Yes. We're all set? Okay. Good morning, everyone. Happy New Year. Welcome to the first session of the Curriculum Committee meeting of 2023, where we have some special guests and a great topic to discuss. College admissions update with Dr. Feeney and Ms. Director. And we look forward to hearing about where we are and where we're headed. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for everybody that's here and for those watching at home. And I'd like to pass it on to Dr. Feeney.
Great. At that, we're very excited to present this topic. It's sort of like a mid-year review, providing an overview of the college admissions process in general and give a snapshot as to where we are right now in the beginning of January 2023 in the process for the class of 2023. So with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Director.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Laura Director, and I am your Director of Guidance here in Port Washington. I'm really excited to talk about this topic today. So I would like to thank the Board of Education, Dr. Hines, Dr. Feeney, and the entire Curriculum Committee for giving me the opportunity to speak about college admissions this morning. Today, I will discuss some of our current guidance and counseling initiatives, provide you with an overview of our college counseling program, and highlight some current trends in admissions. In addition, we're going to compare some data from a neighboring district and discuss future initiatives. To begin, let's review the post-secondary data from our recent graduating class, the class of 2022. As you can see, most of our graduates attend college upon graduation from Schreiber. 88% of our graduates attended four-year school, and 6% attended two-year schools. The remaining 6% of the class of 2022 entered the military, trade schools, or went straight into employment. Schreiber High School counselors work with all students to develop their post-secondary plans, whether college, career, or employment. A review of the data in the New York State Instructional Data Warehouse tells us that Schreiber students are college and career ready. New York State uses benchmarks set by College Board to define college and career readiness. In 2021-22, New York State considered 95% of our students to be college and career ready in one or both math and evidence-based reading and writing. 90% of students were considered college and career ready in both subject areas. Although New York State does not use the ACT as a measure of students' college and career readiness, Schreiber students also exceeded the benchmarks set by ACT. So let's take a look now at the timeline for our college program. Our college counseling timeline has remained mostly consistent with the recent addition of new initiatives to our program. The unofficial kickoff for juniors occurs in December with our junior college night for parents, followed by a junior assembly the next day in school. We begin our junior conferences shortly after the new year, and these continue throughout the month of February. Missed junior conference appointments can be rescheduled during March and April. In May, we will host our second annual college essay writing workshop in collaboration with Schreiber's English department. Juniors are encouraged to stop in to see their counselor with any questions they might have prior to the end of school in June. A common application workshop occurs the third week in August to those incoming seniors with questions on how to fill out the Common App. In late August, transcripts are shared with students and parents for review. September and October are extremely busy with our senior college and financial aid night, college application workshops, individual advising, and college mini fairs. Our college program really shifts into high gear in October and November. This is a time for seniors to finalize their application decisions. Keeping this in mind, we host a wide array of colleges in the form of individual visits, mini college fairs, on-site application days, and a Choose Your Future Fair for students exploring other career options after high school. Let's talk first about our college representative visits. Our office uses a Naviance feature to invite college reps from across the country to Schreiber. We offer 2 to 3 appointments per day for a period of 6 weeks. We always work with any schools whose schedules do not align with ours, so if a school reaches out for availability, we will work with them to accommodate. Our on-site college application days are opportunities for Schreiber seniors to receive admissions decisions in person on the spot. And depending upon the institution, students may also receive merit scholarships based upon their academic profile. This December, we hosted our first Choose Your Future Fair for students seeking alternate post-secondary opportunities. Also in December, the first round of early admissions decisions are released. Most regular decision deadlines occur in early January. And between January and April, seniors finalize their decisions in time for National Decision Day on May 1st. Throughout the entire process, Schreiber High School counselors are available for guidance and support. So Naviance is a tool that we use to review college data and advise students. The graphs you see here are commonly used by our counselors and students. The scattergram features historical data from past Schreiber applicants. Students can plot their GPA and test scores to see how they compare to other students. Although the scattergram is informative, we advise students to do further research on the schools they're interested in. The graph on the bottom right provides additional application data from the school's total number of applicants. Our counselors use this tool with their students to determine whether a school is a reach, target, or likely option for them. Counselors, students, and families also use college websites to assist in students' college searches. Counselors often advise students to check with a college website for up-to-date information on deadline and other application procedures. So one main factor that our students have to consider is admissions plans. In fact, one of our most frequently asked questions is whether students should apply early. Colleges and universities offer different admissions plans, each with its own procedures and terms. Early action and early decision are 2 that I will highlight here. Students who submit their applications early, typically by November 1st, will receive decisions early. However, students and parents must know the differences between the 2 plans. In short, early decision is a binding agreement, while early action is not. Students may submit as many early action applications as they want and do not have to commit to any of those schools that accept them until May 1st. Early decision, however, requires that students, parents, and the counselor sign a statement agreeing to the binding nature of the early application. Students can apply to only one early decision school. Once a student is accepted, they cannot deny the offer. So the answer to the question may be different for different students. That being said, Schreiber seniors are encouraged to apply early to rolling admission schools as well. Schreiber seniors are encouraged to submit non-binding early action applications when possible. And yes, we encourage students to apply early to rolling decision schools, and that typically is due to the fact that they will get a decision sooner than the posted 4 to 6 week timeline. And in addition, many of those rolling admission schools have programs that are selective within them, and our students are advised to submit early to optimize their chances of getting into those programs. So now we're going to transition from the process of applying to schools to our current trends in admissions. The college admissions landscape has changed dramatically over the last 10 to 15 years, but the pandemic seems to have accelerated those changes. Tom Ehlers, president of Methodize, told junior parents at Schreiber in December that this year was the most competitive year ever in college admissions. In a few minutes, I'll share with you some data that will support that claim. Additionally, best-selling author and professor Jeffrey Salingo has 20 years of experience researching college admissions, but reported this year that 75% of schools that use the Common Application accept more than half their applicants. There are now over 1,000 schools that subscribe to the Common Application. Further, he stresses that there are plenty of spots to be had, just not at the small set of elite institutions whose freshman classes have not barely budged since the late 1970s. We will explore that point as well in a moment when we review our performance at highly selective and Ivy League institutions. Over the last few years, we've seen an increase in the number of applications to large Southern universities, and that is especially true at Schreiber. Recent articles point to the increase in popularity of Southern flagship institutions and cite reasons for the increase. In an article published by Town & Country magazine this fall, the author states that there are clear and practical reasons for the shift. It's no secret how prohibitive entry into selective schools has become, particularly as so many went test optional during the pandemic. Sending application numbers soaring. So we'll see more about those record numbers in a few minutes. An article in the Washington Examiner claims that students are attracted to higher chances of acceptance into the university's honors programs, and students tend to appreciate stereotypical college experiences promised at these campuses along with the rigor of academic life. So let's bring it back to Schreiber. A review of the last 3 admission cycles reveals that Schreiber students are also submitting more applications than in previous years. Seniors who applied to college in 2022 submitted an average of 11.5 applications each. This trend mirrors the upward trend of applications submitted to colleges nationwide, and you can see that this is approximately more than 1.5 applications more per student from the year before. In the class of 2023, as of today, 84% of our seniors have applied to college. While early admissions makes up a large percentage of these students, this also does include students who applied regular decision. Keep in mind that complete data for the class of 2023 will be available after graduation. Another popular topic and frequently asked question over the last few years pertains to test optional policies. Test optional schools have been around since prior to the pandemic. However, they've increased in number due to circumstances surrounding COVID-19. In fact, the number of test optional institutions doubled during the pandemic. Students must carefully read each college's criteria if they are considering to apply test optional. Often, an additional supplement is required in place of the SAT or ACT. We do advise students to take the SAT and or ACT before considering whether or not they should apply test optional. Our Schreiber students have the opportunity to have access to free test prep through Methodize, and we also encourage all students to take advantage of that opportunity. While many schools have already waived the testing requirements or have continued to be test optional for the class of 2024, many other schools have not yet decided. So we still advise students whose scores are in the middle 50% or higher of the school's accepted student profile to submit their scores. And those conversations occur during those junior conferences. So let's take another look again at our most recent graduates from the class of 2022. Members of the class of 2022 were accepted at more than 280 colleges and universities. So these pennants are just a small representation of those schools. I'll pause for a quick minute here. Okay, so now we will talk a bit about the selective admissions data that we have here. This is, again, is the class of 2022. We have a list of the Ivy League institutions here and how our students fared last year. So the columns on the left show the number of students who applied, the number who were accepted, and the percentage of applicants who were accepted. And I've also included in the middle the total number of applications received by each institution and their overall acceptance rate. The last three columns include data from a neighboring school district. While this is incredibly useful, we should be mindful that we do not possess the entire context to make a true comparison. However, this does provide us with information as how we compare. Keep in mind that each one of these institutions posted record numbers of applicants in 2022, with the exception of Dartmouth, which remained flat. However, Dartmouth did report a record number of applications the year before in 2021. So a few moments ago, I also stated that these institutions have not increased the size of their incoming freshman classes in over 40 years. When we consider the selectivity of these schools, our counselors have a responsibility, and they do discuss these statistics when advising our students. All of our counselors are committed to providing students and parents with clear, concise data when discussing the school's selectivity. On these next two slides, we'll see data from Tier 1 colleges and universities. We have a similar setup here with Port Washington Schreiber stats on the left, the overall totals in the middle, and our neighboring school district on the right. 20 schools make up this list of Tier 1 institutions, including flagship public institutions to elite private institutions. Similar to the Ivies, these schools received record numbers of applications in 2022. So this is just a continuation of the first one, and you can see the second set of 10 highly selected Tier 1 schools. Now that we've seen this data, let's compare and review. Schreiber students performed better than our neighboring district at 4 of the 8 Ivy League schools. We have the same acceptance rate at 2 schools, and we were outperformed in 2 schools. Our acceptance rate at the 20 Tier 1 schools was better at 11 of the 20 institutions. Our acceptance rate was the same as our neighbor at 3 schools, and our rate was worse at 6 of the 20 schools. You can see here a few more pennants representing the class of 2022. But we know there's so much more to the story than just getting accepted. While our students can let out a sigh of relief having submitted their applications, other factors must be considered prior to matriculation. Students and families have much to consider before committing to a college on May 1st, so they must consider their best fit academically, socially, and personally. Often, financial aid awards are compared to weigh the economic impact the decision will have on a family. Families must have the resources available to them to make informed decisions. And this is where the relationships our high school counselors that started in 9th grade have with their students and families matter most. Our counselors do play a pivotal role in the process with students at this time. Students often seek out their guidance to help them with making this all-important decision. So now let's get a sneak preview into the college acceptances for the class of 2023. And again, a reminder, this is an early preview. So members of the class of 2023 have received early admissions decisions from the colleges and universities on this slide. In addition to the colleges and universities that you see listed, I must highlight that Schreiber has its first Questbridge National College Match Scholar this year. Questbridge, thank you. Questbridge is a highly selective admission and scholarship process through which high-achieving students who meet the criteria can be admitted early with full 4-year scholarships to Questbridge College Partners. And this year, our scholar matched with the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where that student will attend in the fall. These partners also include other Ivy League and Tier 1 institutions from across the country. So again, keep in mind that acceptances are still pending, and this list will continue to grow. Okay, so we've looked at the process, we've looked at preliminary admissions data for 2023. So now let's look at our current initiatives. So this year, we've seen a tremendous shift back to in-person meetings and conferences. Counselors have been eager to return to campuses to see and learn about their new initiatives since COVID. So not only do we all enjoy these live interactions and visits with our college partners, but our students do benefit as well. Our counselors frequently come away from these visits and meetings with newly learned information to pass along to their students. And while many programs returned last year, most colleges were still virtual. This year, we saw a full return from our college partners to in-person visits and fairs. Keep in mind that college travel budgets may not have returned to pre-pandemic levels, so some are still opting for virtual meetings. Still, out of 88 individual college visits to Schreiber, 79 of them were in person. A Schreiber High School counselor attends each visit and shares information with the other counselors in the department. This fall, we also hosted 4 mini college fairs in the Schreiber lobby for students to make connections with their schools or to learn about a new college or university. Over the last few years, Schreiber High School counselors saw the need for a fair to connect students to other post-secondary opportunities. This fall's Choose Your Future Fair successfully achieved that goal and is a welcome addition to our college and career program. And again in the spring, we are excited to host our college consortium for students and parents. Attendees can expect face-to-face interactions with dozens of college representatives. And information panels on admissions topics will also provide students and parents with a complete overview of the process. So we're also committed to expanding college possibilities for our students. Our attendance at various meetings and events this year help us to better inform students about their options. You can see some of those meetings that we've attended here. The Colleges That Change Lives is one to highlight, or otherwise known as CTCL, which is an organization of 40 higher education institutions that promote a student-centered approach to college education. Now, most of these schools are smaller liberal arts colleges that offer excellent programs where students can thrive. And we expect an announcement about the date for a live in-person meeting to come this spring. College admissions has experienced significant changes, as we mentioned, in the past few years, and we don't expect that to change anytime soon. Therefore, it's incumbent upon us to be informed of current trends in college admissions. Ongoing professional development takes place in the form of in-person workshops, webinars, and conferences. Recently, we partnered with the University of Chicago to explore recent trends in writing letters of recommendation. The New York State Association for College Admissions Counseling will return to an in-person Winter Institute, a day-long professional development for high school and college admissions counselors. And this spring, we also plan to meet with the State University of New York Financial Aid Office to learn about upcoming changes to the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid, which is expected to be opened up in October. In addition, the National Association for College Admissions Counseling and the New York State Counselors Association have all returned to in-person annual conferences. Our participation at these events allow us to turnkey information to our students and families. Enhancing our communication to our families is another ongoing goal for the department. Over the summer, I worked with Shannon Woolen, our District Communication and Public Relations Administrator, to learn how to update our new website. Our Schreiber website is regularly updated with resources for students and parents. This year, our college handbook will be posted to the new EdWheel format with the option to translate into multiple languages. The monthly Vikings Counselor Connection shares ongoing information about the college process at Schreiber. And emailing and texting has also become easier with our website platform, Edlio. We also have plans to increase our social media presence with the addition of an Instagram page. And at our live events this year, a Spanish-speaking translator was available for parents who needed access in their home language. Opportunities for our students are also enhanced through our partnerships with local institutions for higher education. This fall, our English language learners had the opportunity to visit 2 campuses with some of our counselors, and 1 additional visit is planned for the spring. We have dual enrollment partnerships with St. John's University, SUNY Stony Brook, and LIU Post, with more being explored. Our college partners also provide workshops for our students and sit on information panels at our Spring College Consortium. Feedback we receive from our college partners is consistently positive, and our representatives often look for further opportunities to collaborate with us. So now let's talk a little bit about future initiatives. As our college program continues to evolve, we need to ensure that we're meeting our students' needs in our post-pandemic world. We've begun the work to align our program with our district's mission and vision, but there's more to be done. As we emerge from the pandemic, we will learn more about its impact upon our students. As a department, we will explore ways to strengthen the connections between social emotional learning and post-secondary planning. Do our students have the coping strategies and resilience to handle the highs and lows of the college application process? Do students understand the concept of life balance, and how well do they put it into practice? What do our college retention rates tell us about the goals our students set and tell us about our college program? These and other essential questions will guide our work for the foreseeable future. Analyzing the data in the instructional data warehouse to inform our college program will also strengthen our alignment with our district's mission and vision, the portrait of a graduate. Initiatives like College Pioneers at Weber for first-generation college-bound students and exploring ways for it to be expanded to Schreiber are other possibilities to consider. Our professional development opportunities will also grow and evolve. Applying a trauma-informed lens to college and career advising and developing cross-cultural competencies are 2 particular areas of focus. As I mentioned earlier, improving communications is an ongoing goal. Our passion for cultivating a culture of informed college consumers will propel our decisions in the near and far future. Increasing our visits to colleges will allow us to make meaningful connections for our students. And last, increased social media presence and additional opportunities for parent engagement will be explored to keep families informed of current trends. So what are the takeaways from all this? Each year, colleges decide how they want to shape each incoming class, but that information is unknown to students, parents, and to high school counselors. As nebulous and uncertain as the college admissions landscape is, our students are getting into selective colleges at rates that are in some cases better than in neighboring districts. The statistics show us that it's more likely to be rejected at a top-tier Ivy League institution due to increased applications for the same number of spots. We must continue to inform parents and students of other highly selective options that may exist somewhat under the radar. Students need strategies to cope with the rejection from these schools. Fostering students' resilience is key, but we must start sooner. Providing additional opportunities for students and parents to learn how to use tools like Naviance and to understand trends in college admissions are some ideas worth exploring. Earlier awareness to students and parents of the college process at Schreiber is needed to cultivate a culture of informed college consumers in Port Washington. So I'm going to pause here if you wanted to
As we're wrapping this up, this presentation, unrelated to the presentation, our secondary campus has decided to do a book read, the middle school and the high school. The book they happen to choose is Frank Rooney's well-regarded book, Where You Go Is Not Who You Be, which is directly related to a lot of the themes that Mrs. Director explored in the presentation. It's open to the public. We don't provide the book, but if you click that QR code, you can go to the sign up, you can click there for a summary of the book. We've got 3 discussions, 2 in person, 1 virtual, and it should be informative for everybody. And that wraps it up. Here's the presentation.
No questions. Just the beginning. Thank you very much for a very detailed description of where we are and where we're headed. I'm sure there are many questions and thoughts. First of all, our committee members, and then we'll move it up to board members and the public as well. Would you like to start?
Sure, I'm happy to start. So first, that was a really good presentation. I was jotting down questions throughout, but many of the questions that I jotted down, you answered throughout, which is a great sign, and particularly, in particular, the scatter plot, seeing the scatter plot, because I was wondering, I'm going to ask a question about it, but I was wondering how students, just initially, from just being students, match to sort of set of colleges, because there's so many options. And then I also like that you had neighboring school districts in there, because I think that's those are really important metrics. I don't know how you got the data, but it's really nice to, I guess, it sounds like I don't want to know. But it's really nice to
tell
see.
you, but we have to.
Okay, so let me ask, I have 2 or 3 relatively brief questions. So the question on the scatter plot is, I think that's a really valuable tool to have students that have, let's say, I'm going to make up an average, 3.9 grade point average, understand like what is the group of schools that take students that have a 3.9 grade point average. So I guess my question is, when do they see that initially? And if you could just give a little bit more detail on how they see it, because what I envision is like if they were to see it relatively early, they could then have enough time to sort of change their trajectory if they wanted to and say, you know what, if I can boost my GPA by X number of points, all of a sudden these schools become competitive for me, versus seeing it, senior year when it's like, well, this is it. So can you tell me when they see it and when they get a perspective on that?
Yes, so our students have access to Naviance, even in what they actually get in middle school, but in high school, we start talking about that. So our freshman class, and we really want to get them acclimated, and our work really more involves them getting to know themselves as learners. So mostly the beginning, I would say junior year is when they're first seeing that, with the exception of, we do have some very interested sophomores, but I think that's where we talk about looking at ways to provide an earlier focus to this. I think we all agree that students looking at it sooner for the reasons that you say, having the opportunity, I think that scattergram is powerful for that visual, right? And like you said, and I think, I've never, my years of doing this, I've never had anyone walk away with less of an understanding after looking at that. So we are looking at ways to have students really pay attention to it a bit sooner. And that's some of the work that, I'll do in conjunction with the administration at Schreiber and how we can make it happen sooner.
And part of that includes, and I think this was in the presentation, having one of the goals is to have an Naviance night
Yes.
for parents, to introduce parents to Naviance. If parents get introduced, then the students can as well. They can explore that on their own, because what you said is absolutely correct. If you're a 10th grader, you can start seeing in the middle of your 10th grade year sort of where your target cloud might be. That's really helpful.
Yeah. So I would just encourage us to think about when the right time is to not just to, because the students I'm really interested in are not the students that are going into Naviance themselves. It's really the students that are not.
Right.
And then just so that they can get an idea. That said, we don't want to overpressure this. So I don't know where that balance is. I just would like, the administration to think about where that balance is and whether middle of junior year to when they, because, you have a guidance meeting every year, or probably is it twice a year, or once a year?
You have what?
A meeting where
They have
guidance.
meetings, so the students can walk in and have meetings, and, there are counselors, there are students that come in and want to look at the scattergrams and earlier grades, and they'll have that one-to-one conversation with their counselor. So as a whole, and yes, absolutely, that is the goal, to increase parent engagement. I am writing this down because it's something that I struggle with too. What is the balance? When is the right time?
Right.
Because we don't, maybe in a one-to-one conversation with a student who's ready for it, it really works. And then, so I agree with you, and I'm
Okay,
taking notes on what you're saying now, so yes, absolutely. Just-
If I could just add on to the whole pressure thing, there is a balance, but if you look at this presentation, when we celebrate the early acceptances, early decision results, it's a wide range of schools, and often when people think of early decision, what are they thinking of? Harvard, Yale, Princeton, any of those. But, for some kids, it's really, they are thrilled with those results out there. And that's an important message. Congratulations, you applied early, you got in. That's terrific news. We celebrate that no matter where the institution is, because you said that's a fit for you. You're interested and excited about that. And, we, the guidance department, the school, the district, how we communicate that information sends messages, subtle or otherwise.
I think another message too is that the faculty of our guidance council is here right now to actually watch this and be a part of this, which is, we certainly appreciate. So thank you.
All right, I really just have one more question because I want to make sure that everybody else has a chance to. Obviously, this is a very, a topic that people really care about. So, I was one of the people who read the Bogart scholarships last year, and I was so impressed with all of the private students. Like, it was just, it blew my mind how successful they were. And so, what I want to do is make sure that the school district is doing everything it can to support them and their goals. And so my question is, and this is going to, not make the administration happy, but I'm going to say it anyway. If you had $1 million, what would you do with it? For the school district, this is not a personal question. Let me narrow that question.
Very happy right now.
So on behalf of the school district, in order to basically take the students who are working so hard, to create opportunities for themselves, what can the school district do better, and what can the school district do better with money? In other words, what is money the sort of limiting factor?
So when I think of, my lens kind of went out this way. How can that money impact each and every student in Port Washington? Although I guess we certainly, we love and support our Bogart scholarship applicants. I think about unlimited resources. I'm really thinking about informal.
I didn't say unlimited.
Well,
resources.
sorry, million. It doesn't count. Opportunities, but like real meaningful opportunities for the students to have access, our kids that maybe don't have access to college campuses, letting them go visit camp. We did, some of our counselors were right on, okay, we're back in person. Let's get some of these kids that will not be able to visit with their families, let's get them on a college campus. Let's have them eat lunch in the student center so they can see what it's like to be a student here. More opportunities like that, taking them on visits to places that maybe are not here in Nassau County, and letting them see and feel what that looks like, maybe for an overnight, I don't know. That's one thought, so that students could benefit. Other thoughts might be bringing in some really powerful speakers to speak to families from across Port Washington to really talk about the trends and what we can do to support one another in guiding our kids moving forward. Those are just two things that come to mind. Lots of professional development for the counselors, again, to go visit some of these places. That's where.
Is it every year, or is it just a one-shot deal? If it's a one-shot deal, and I'm not saying because they're here, I think we need to, at some point, if we can reduce the caseload for our counselors to make it more personalized for our kids. I think that's really, really important, to forge those connections with kids. I think that's really paramount, but it's a one-shot deal, so we have to find $1 million, I guess, every year somewhere else.
I couldn't.
But that is, but that's
not
really.
happening right now. It was a hypothetical.
But it really is critical, because I think that the relationship between the counselor and the student, as early as possible, to talk about not only the university, but multiple pathways, is really, really critical in all this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I will add on though, because yes, all that's important. I think an opportunity to expand some of the physical space, and we just did a lot of that, but some additional expansion, bring in some more CTE programs that we could build and create within this high school, keep our kids here, so we wouldn't have to send them to BOCES. That would be great. There are a lot of programs that our students would benefit from. But, space, those would require some dedicated spaces, and not the size of a classroom, more like, a presentation area like this. Just a few thoughts.
Now, that's not oriented toward college admissions necessarily, that's just.
It's oriented towards what our students will do when they graduate from high school. And, the message, college admissions is clearly critical, but we care about the success and the well-being of all of our students and for them finding a path. And sometimes that path starts with work, then goes to college and beyond.
My turn? So thank you. Thank you. I had a little bit of PTSD. I'm so happy to have it behind me. I came back. But thank you. It shows that you were really very comprehensive. I remember when we started in 9th grade here, and the then head of guidance said, don't think about college ed, talking to the students. Don't think about it, focus on transitioning into cyber. And so there is the kids who are going to constantly be checking their GPAs, and they have that, you can't stop them from checking, it was Aspen, or checking Aspen or going on, they can go into the scatter plot whenever they want. The kids have an Naviance account, the parents have a Naviance account, and you can go on if you understand that tool is there. But what I noticed in the progression is that the GPAs of the schools changed as the test scores became less important. GPAs became more important, and so first of all, the scattergram depends on the input of the kids to put in where they got accepted and what their GPA was, and so we're relying on their data basically to inform the scattergram. I don't know that it comes from the guidance counselors.
It's something, and we talk about this all the time, each one of us asks the students directly, indirectly, messages, constant requests, hey guys, pay it forward, the classes after you are going to look at this. So we've talked about ways to maybe incentivize this, we just haven't come up with the answer yet, but, we remember very well, in former worlds, I've come from places where it was incentivized, so it's something that we do need to improve or motivate these students to report on that information.
So part of my point is that, so for example, Florida State or University of Florida or Indiana, as those schools became more popular, they became more competitive. And so a child who in 9th grade who may have had the GPA to get in, when looking at the scattergram, may have placed out, may no longer be competitive. So I think there's a tension between saying, okay, I want to get into this school, so I'm going to work hard to raise my GPA while also trying to get the benefit of being in high school. And I think that's, to experience life, still a child in school and to grow and learn. So I think I leave it up to the experts to decide how to balance that. But I was always a little cautious about the scattergram because trends change. And schools that were once in reach as early as 9th grade all of a sudden aren't. So I throw that out just as a not to discourage anybody, but just the reality of where we are, so.
And that's where, again, the relationships with the counselors and the students comes in, because they all tell you the students, scattergram is great, but it's also, it goes back about 10 years, and we recently adjusted the data just shorten that time frame a bit, but it does, University of Tampa 2 years ago had a 48% acceptance rate. Last year it went down to 24, I think it was, 1 year. So a scattergram isn't going to help you there, and that's the University of Tampa. So it's correct. We use these tools with the caveat that you still have to have a conversation and be advised by your counselor, and always look at the college website for the most recent information.
In the broader sense, we want to remind parents and students, however, do this early on, that, okay, the numbers are important, but you're more than a number, right? So you can be aware of it, but keep in mind that commitment, dedication, perseverance, finding a passion, exploring that's a real important part of your high school experience. So the numbers matter, but you are more than a number. And there's some nice presentations around those themes I've done in the past.
And it's also important because the colleges are looking for more than a number. I mean, they will have the number, they will look, but beyond that, they look for many, many, many other things.
Which, another point, a number of years ago, we hosted my previous district, the director of admissions at Harvard, and you had great presentations, staff, faculty, and some students, and one of the things he shared with us that has stayed with me, 95% of the students who apply to Harvard are admissible to Harvard. 95% of the students who apply to Harvard could succeed, get a degree, and thrive and contribute. And at that time, their acceptance rate was 6%.
I think it was 3.14
Yeah.
last year.
Just because.
Oh, just because, right.
So, okay, so you mentioned that you use the Naviance feature to invite the admissions officers to campus. Is that the only way? Is it only through Naviance, or is there a phone call or an email, or are we having those personal connections with the admissions officer?
Yes, so, for starters, when we open up the calendar each year, so we have to open it up in mass, and then we let everybody know that we have those appointments available. And then phone calls are made to some of the most selective schools. One of the first things that I did, that's the summer when I first got here, was reach out to each one of our Ivy League schools and our Tier 1 schools to establish a connection that, I'm here now, happy to be here, please associate me now with Port Washington, and do you have any questions about Port Washington? Do you have any questions about our GPA, our programs? Is there something that you need to know? And those conversations were not one and done. Many of those schools did come here this fall. They will certainly be invited here again for the spring. There are also some days that I'm planning to travel to some of those schools directly, because it's been some time since I've been to those campuses. So, we're sort of returning back to that in person. But yes, in many cases, it's a phone call. Hey, I see that we don't have you down yet. Let's set something up. And typically, if they are back doing travel, then they will do so. So yes, it's the announcement, but it's not the only way. If that makes sense.
And how are we getting those schools to come here? Right, do you find that there are schools that you have invited to come here who don't want to come or won't come, or I've heard often there are scheduling conflicts, but if my thought is if they're going to pick one, Garden City, Jericho, Syosset, we're not that far away, and I realize you're 24 hours in a day and 8 hours in a week.
Right.
Are you finding that there are schools that just won't come here?
I think it's not so much that they won't, because it's a Schreiber, something that they don't want to come here. I think it's that, there are certain institutions that quite honestly don't need to come to every single school because they're going to get applications from us regardless. And that's something that, I'm sure that we'll keep experiencing. There are some schools that, I think of some institutions that probably don't have us on their rotation. Are they visiting those other districts as well? I'm not really sure. But it's something that I could easily find out. It's worth finding out. There are some schools that come together. I think one of the consortiums that I mentioned, the Exploring College Options, they've moved towards doing parent meetings in evenings in the spring and the fall. So they'll just make an announcement out to all of the schools, hey, come meet with us, and they tend not to come to individual meetings. So, and it depends on the institution, but some of them, for example, Harvard admissions isn't necessarily coming and doing a one-on-one admissions call, but they'll do these large community events. So, but it's definitely, it's something now that we're getting back from these remote visits. I need to find more information. One of the things that at the New York State Conference, and then in September at the National Conference, I'm hoping to get a better sense from the schools, how they've changed their visit policies and what trends what are they doing. This has been ongoing for a while, colleges tend to have bigger travel budgets in the fall than in the spring. So sometimes, by that point, they're not visiting campuses. So those are the things that we need to find out more information, how they've changed.
So, I just went under the current trends slide on, I guess it's number 11, where in 2022, or it doesn't really matter, 2021, 9.8 applications per applicant, a high of 42. Does that mean that there was a student who submitted 42 applications?
Yes.
So in that respect, and maybe I'm getting off the topic here, but why? And does the school is there anybody in the guidance department saying this is just, it's over?
Insane.
Absolutely,
Because
because it puts, is on your end, so.
Absolutely. Counselors never advise students to apply. We can only advise. It's ultimately a family decision because, as you know, with 42 applications comes 42 application costs and 42 supplemental essays. I mean, maybe a few less if they're, putting in some state schools. We would never. It's so overwhelming for a student to do that. And that might be one at 42, but I'm sure there were others that same year in the 30s and in the 20s, and it's too much. We actually guide them and say, you can create a well-balanced list with, let's say 10 schools. You can do this if you've selected the appropriate number of schools and you think that they will match your personal, your academic, and your family's financial fit. You absolutely can be successful. So it's really about the schools.
I'm sorry, just one more question. On the comparison, I'm really tempted to find out, were the comparison schools the same school? Is it the same school district?
One school district, yes,
One school
on
district.
both lists.
Okay. Do you care to tell us which school district?
I have been asked to keep that confidential.
Okay. How did you choose the school district then? Is it like Schreiber in
it's
terms of
a-
demographic? Is it just because it's in our quadrant?
It's in our quadrant, so I reached out to multiple school districts on the North Shore, our quadrant, and this particular school had agreed to provide us with the data under the condition of anonymity, and I'm very grateful that they were willing to do that for us.
What does the quadrant mean?
Nassau County, so we're broken up into quadrants, North Shore.
So
West,
superintendents are
yes.
part of quadrants, so for us, it would be Manhasset, right, it would be Great Neck. You can just keep going south a little bit, you can go along the North Shore, so Roslyn.
So it's G.
They're all it's all geography, so
Yes.
geographically similar. And there are a lot of course, other similarities as well.
So I was going to ask, in this particular school, I won't ask you how many students are in the graduating class, because that might give away the school, but,
You're digging.
I said I won't ask, but I'm curious about the comparison, because I think it's relevant, I personally think it's relevant, is, the number of students at that particular school, what is the ratio of, what is the composition of their guidance department? So are we dealing with one guidance counselor per graduating class? Is it structured differently? Is it a model that you think would help Schreiber? I understand you went to the different quadrants and maybe you didn't have a choice as to who would give you data, but is there a model there that you think is better for Schreiber, or will you just?
Can I answer that?
Yeah,
Sure.
Thank you. Reduce the caseload.
Yeah.
That's
What is
really what it is.
100%?
What is the caseload?
Caseload is you have one counselor
No, no,
per,
yes.
no, because they'll give it away.
No,
No,
what
for
hours?
hours.
Hours.
We're
What's ours?
200 per counselor. 200 per counselor.
So less
It,
than,
it, per, because of stay with the
Total.
student. or
Yes,
whatever.
total.
Yes, 4 years.
So it's like 50 are applying.
It tends to be a bit greater stuff, like, we're a bit over 200. Yes. And I completely agree.
So this part of what we can take from this is they have a different structure and they have a lower caseload. Whether it's because they have fewer students or they have more.
Regarding the structure, I know we've talked about a different structure, we have one dedicated counselor. I'm not familiar with schools that have that model. Certainly not in the North Shore. This school does not have that model.
But they have a lower caseload.
They have lower caseloads, and I think with again, I'm going to highlight the relationships. So our counselors have the ability to build that starting in 9th grade, and that's where that would shift if, that would look very different with a different structure. So I'm going to defer back to Dr. Hines, reduce caseload.
and I'm not saying that's a panacea, by the way, like that is one spoke on the.
Okay, we have almost a little, sorry. Writing up a little bit. And the professional development piece. We're attending a workshop and the Winter Institute, so forth and so on. Is this professional development new to our guidance department? Has there been professional, because the stats we're seeing here, these kids have been in the pipeline since 2000, I don't know, maybe they started kindergarten, 8, 9, whatever it was, right? And so is this professional development, is this something that the counselors have had the benefit of all along, so therefore the students have? Or is this something new that we're hoping is going to?
So professional development, counselors often attend professional development and conferences, and colleges always, each year they come around to talk to the counselors and offer meetings and workshops. What's new, maybe some of the, I think those that I mentioned, the counselors have been going to for years. There might be some new and additional ones. I talked about the financial aid, because the FAFSA is changing for 2023, and we really need to get ahead of that so we can inform our families. So that would be new. But ongoing professional development, perhaps additional visits to campuses. Counselors have had the opportunities to do so. It's been a few years with the pandemic, but now they can get back to it. But there are some limitations on how often. There's obviously costs involved in those visits. So that we're looking forward to an increase, maybe some of the same things, but I'm also looking for new opportunities. Again, I think I talked about making sure that we align with some of the needs that students are presenting right now. We all know that students are, there are just some differences since the pandemic. The need to ensure that we're using a trauma-focused lens, so that would lead to other opportunities for SEL professional development to help us with our college advising.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a lot, I'm going to try and narrow it as much as possible, I'm sorry. So, I don't know if I start big picture and go down or vice versa. I'm gonna go small first. There's some things here that are new, that are potentially incur costs and then perhaps don't, right? So it's always a question of how can we grow and make change that is not necessarily having a budget impact. How can, just our departments and our practices change, right? Versus things that would require some kind of support, financial support. So for example, I know that the writing workshops that I think they were new last year,
Yes,
and I believe that it was described as successful.
yes.
So what did that, was that something that incurred cost for the district? Was it something that was done in-house? How did that work out?
So that was in-house, that was born out of an idea from the counselors. They collaborated with the English teachers and they came up, so it did not incur any cost to Schreiber. They worked with resources that they had gathered and some new resources and basically put together this program for all juniors so that they could get some tips on how to start the college essay. Juniors came during selected times up in the library, they all worked in pods and they were sitting down and, had opportunities to watch a presentation, see a video, return it back and interact with their peers and had some time to do some action planning and no incurred cost for that one.
So I guess that's the lens that I'm kind of thinking about is what initiatives can we take on that are simply about our practices and what we can be providing for our students that doesn't incur a cost. And then there's of course the ones that do incur costs,
Right.
caseloads, et cetera, right?
Yes.
So are there other initiatives that we can pursue that help service our students that are not bearing a cost?
I think there are, and I think that they would require the collaboration with Schreiber administration because there are just, some ideas that I've shared with the counselors, just so that we could potentially have more of an impact on smaller groups of students. But then when we do things like that, then we're talking about instructional time, which we have to, we have to be incredibly mindful. So I definitely have those ideas, but it's striking a balance. So yes, and those would not incur any additional cost.
So again, I'm a big fan of professional development and I always want to know from the professionals what they're looking for to improve their ability to meet the needs of our students. So I'm always interested as a board member, and I think our entire board is interested in what our staff feels would help them. So that I guess goes along the lines of, what you would do with $2 million.
Right.
I'm always a fan of how can we spend it on professional development.
Right.
And so I'm just putting that plug in there.
Thank you.
I want a couple other things. We didn't get into subgroups necessarily. And my question is, what initiatives do you see or are we pursuing that help improve the service for our subgroups?
Absolutely. So this year, we redesigned our our high school counseling caseload for our students or mild students or self-contained special education students because, working with the counselors and with the special education department, we identified a need to better service those school students with their post-secondary planning. So by having we actually have 2 dedicated counselors, but they swap, one does 9/11, one does 10 and 12. But by having those students identified with one particular counselor, again, that fosters a relationship that they can use and really help develop that, their post-secondary plans, whether they are going to college, whether they are going to trade school or career. We also, with the addition of having our students go to BOCES for CTE programs, and to Dr. Feeney's point before, it allows our students to then identify, perhaps with a career that might send them to college for that particular trade, or might send them to a pathway for that trade.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, Dr. Feeney and I met with a gentleman who was actually a parent in Port Washington, I think it was last week. No, it wasn't last week, it was this week, so it was a short week. His focus and expertise is on something called middle skills. And those are training for jobs where you don't need a degree per se, but you can't just walk in and like you're just selling retail. It's explicit skill development And there are partnerships with local community colleges here, most notably in Suffolk Community College on the Brentwood campus. And I'm not saying this is for any subgroup in particular, because I don't want to target subgroups for middle skills positions. But these are positions that are nationwide, that there's an incredible deficit where they're just not filled. And so what we're looking to do is take a deep dive into what that entails, how we could potentially entice students to move in that direction. And I'll wait until you're done asking questions, because I just want to bring it up to 30,000 feet after asking. Thanks.
And again, with our English language learners, you know, 3 of our counselors took the students to campuses because again, the need was to make that connection, have these students who may not go on campus visits, let them go and see what it's like to be a student on those campuses. And we're always looking at ways that does, even though the visit itself is free, there's costs in transportation, so.
So that's,
So that's something.
is that something that we should be expanding?
Definitely. But again, so the counselors have tailored in-school programs. So, you know, we just did a junior presentation for the entire grades. Now, you know, our counselors will work with those populations to bring it to smaller groups for understanding and those relationships that, again, fostering relationships, counselors understand, students understand who their go-to person is, who's going to help them identify with their goals.
2 more, and then I hope they're quick. Having had, I now have 3 students, my own children in school, and I've heard from so many other experienced parents at that phase of life, visit schools talking about student burnout. After the high school experience of finally getting to the finish line, and then they're there, and so many of the professionals at the college level are talking about needing to expand their mental health services for their students. So I don't necessarily have a question, it's another thing that I want out in the ether about what's happening for our students trying to get to these places, right? And last,
If I could
Yeah.
just address that, right, I mean, 2 things, and that's part of the message of what we're trying to convey to parents and families as well as the students, this notion that, you know, that fancy school with that fancy, might not be for you, right? There may be a better fit, you're more than a number, you know, let's find the right fit. And, you know, that's really an important message to them. And reminding them of, you know, if we focus here at the K-12 level on SEL mental health, we help imbue them with those skills so they can be more successful and don't burn out when they get to college.
And I think too, you know, we talk about, like we just said, you know, the finish line. I think if we sort of view this more as a marathon, it's about life. I think that the messages out there for our kids is so tightly enmeshed in this this notion of everything is riding on this, when in fact, if we just sort of dial back the pressure a little bit, and you know, so many kids come into the office, and even parents, you know, they have that look of fear on their face. Everybody's going to get into college. We can't say which one, but they will absolutely get into college. So that kind of goes back to that parent engagement that I was talking about earlier with our $1 million a year budget increase. Excuse me.
So excited
So,
about that.
yeah.
This is the best day ever.
Having those conversations and, you know, just sort of explaining that a little bit of that mindset, so our students might feel less of that sense of burnout, because they're still our high achieving top kids are always going to be high achievers. We need to sort of talk to kids more about how to do college. What are the skills that you need to apply in college that you applied at Schreiber versus giving them the sense that it's sort of this finish line to cross.
Now, do you mind if I just, I want to piggyback on this, but I want to put all this in perspective. I think it's very clear that there are things we're doing well, there are things we could certainly improve. There are things that we've done over the past 3.5 years. We've had multiple directors of guidance, right? So there's been a lot of change in a very short period of time. What I try to do with students and with parents at times is when you look at the life of somebody, there's a piece of paper, there's a point here and a point here, and the child's experience in high school is from here to here when you look at the whole thing in its totality, right? What I try to look at, it's like, look at Piaget, look at Eric Erickson, there's always phases, there are always stages. This high school stage from when you start applying to acceptance, to whatever university or college or wherever you're going, that's phase 1 and phase 2. You apply, you're accepted. And that's a very intense period of time, as Deb and others here. By the way, who's gone through that? Most of us, right? And as Deb said, we're still recovering. Then there's the graduation once they actually get there. So once they actually they're there for 4 years, they go on to master's or doctoral. There's a whole other 5 years, 6, 7 years. What I'm concerned about, and what I would love for us to start focusing on, we should continue to focus on this. But what's happening with students after they graduate? What's happening to students if you have to fast forward by another 5 years from now? And let's say they're 30 and 31. That to me is the ultimate mark on how much time parents have presented to their kids and pushed into their children to flourish. How do we know that they're actually flourishing when they hit the latter stages of their 20s to their 30s? That to me is, and I don't know how quantifiable that is, but that to me is the ultimate exit outcome as far as what all this is for. And if mental health gets in the way or other things get in the way because of that process, that's something we have to really, really take a look at as far as what we can control.
That
So
sounds like a longitudinal.
it
study.
is, but I want us to keep that in mind when we're focusing on such a short period of time. It's where will our kids be as young adults when they exit from here? And it's the same for parents, and that's very hard to do. And I think Schreiber, and I think Weber, and I think all of our elementary schools give them a great foundation. I really, really do. So the question becomes, after all this data and all these conversations and great questions, is now what? Now what do? We know $1 million is not going to happen, but there are other things that we can do, I think, both short-term and long-term, that we can make this experience better. And that book, by the way, if you haven't read it yet, if I could assign homework, I would assign that homework assignment to every parent that's here, because it's well worth the read. All right.
Thank
So,
Mike,
yeah.
kind of more of a really big picture. So when you look at data like this, right, we're talking percentage points and GPAs that are off by a 0.01 and like really nutty stuff. Who didn't take this one course? I had a child asked why she didn't take X. Like it gets really crazy. So if it's really coming down to stuff that would blow your mind, right? How else, both from a philosophical portrait of a graduate perspective and in terms of outcomes, what can we be doing as a district that makes A, our students, and B, our district stand out, because we have a school profile, right? For all of these schools to look at. How do we make our students super appealing outside of the data? Meaning, oh, that's a Schreiber graduate, that likely means X. Like what, am I
I
asking
think,
this right?
so it's a really good question. I'm thinking about the profile, so how do Schreiber students stand out versus another, are we talking about another student in the quadrant or another student in general or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, pick one.
I think, some of it depends, that's where the college's knowledge of our programs comes into play. Whether or not the student has taken research, whether or not the students have how many AP courses they've taken. The way they feel about our students when they come here, they see, they know the many, many, many activities that the students get involved in, the service that the students do here. I was also thinking a little bit though of what Dr. Finney said earlier about Harvard, when they say, 95% of these kids could be accepted. There are many things that make students stand out. I think it's a good question. I would like to turn that also around maybe to some of our Ivy League representatives and say, hey, is there something, when you're reading a Schreiber application before you even know the school, what is it that makes you know this is a Schreiber student? I see. Did you want to say something? I feel like dying to talk. No, go ahead. Okay. But I think that it's our programs, they see, representatives, this is anecdotal, students, representatives will say, we love coming here, we love your kids, we love, they're involved in so many things, yet they're so articulate and they use critical thinking skills in ways that we don't typically see. So it's really anecdotal what I possess here. I can't say that I have anything, because I see what you're saying, it's nominal in some ways. But that's a really good question, and one that I would like to explore further.
So part of what we have, and Mr. Director and I will talk about this, right, this is one of the tools. There's, I guess we didn't include it, but one of the other things you can do is look historically at number of applicants by school from Schreiber, number of applicants each year, number of acceptances, right? So, and, to, I think your point earlier, how you can see for some schools, 10 years ago, wow, we were getting a lot more kids in, and, you see it dries up a little bit and to become more competitive. So I think one of the things we can do is really look at where are our students struggling to get in, for whatever reason, whether it's this school, this location, whatever. And what sort of outreach can we do so that those admissions reps get to know us, our program, our students? Some of probably the best ambassadors of Schreiber are Schreiber students, right? So if a Schreiber student maybe applies, they apply, but then nobody's attending, they don't get to know Schreiber students. So that's where, we sort of maybe need to interject ourselves a little more and say, hey, let's talk a little bit about Schreiber students, why don't you come, meet, and try to establish those relationships. And strengthen those relationships, I should say.
So I also want to add, and when we get decisions that are puzzling, in spite of, we know what the numbers are, and I'm going to speak about the Ivy specifically. Our counselors are picking up the phone to say, we'll talk about students that get deferred. Our counselors are right on the phone with those representatives. What is it? Can you say what this is? Is there something that you didn't see? And every one of those conversations is around, there's nothing that they're saying, well, gee, the student didn't do this, or we questioned this. These are all, they're not soft denies, they're true deferrals. So they really are, the volume is just putting these students into a later review pool. But I really think it's a great question, and, like we talked about.
Yeah, I think, listen, in 2-3 years, maybe even sooner, it's about the brand of our school district and what that represents.
Yes.
When a student leaves here and they apply to wherever they're applying to, they know they're coming from an incredible institution, and this student is ready to excel in any way. And so that's why the work with our strategic plan with the portrait is so important, because that becomes part of our DNA as a school district, and then it gets broadcast out there to every university. That's really what it is. It's a slow bake, and I know some of us want this to happen overnight, but it won't. But it's starting to happen now. I really do believe it, because of the people that we hire.
I'm sorry, now we're moving on to board members.
Yeah. Okay, so, I'm actually it's great, thank you very much for the great presentation, it's very informative. Since I'm gonna rush, there's not a lot of time. I'm most interested in these numbers and these comparisons, just in terms of bringing it all back, so it's something that we can kind of track, in order for the board of trustees to track this and understand how we actually are doing to assess our admissions. I think it's it's a little bit hard to understand where we are with this information, because obviously it's compared against one school that we don't even know what school it is, so I don't necessarily know how telling it is that this is kind of our comparison. I don't know, understand really what we're comparing against, but what I think is also important is, well, it's impossible to overstate how important it is and how much personal effort and trial and tribulations goes into, Ivy League admissions for these kids. It's really only, we have 15 kids getting into Ivy League schools, and there's a lot of other kids. And so I think it would be also really important to understand how are we doing in terms of, like schools where I went, Wisconsin, schools that aren't on these top lists, but really are, those second tier schools that probably 100 or more of our kids are gonna end up going to. And I think it's really important to try to understand how we're doing against our neighbors and more of our neighbors in that tier of schools that I would imagine like the majority of our college-bound students are actually going to, or have a shot at getting into, especially considering that the Ivies, like you said, 95% of the kids should be getting in, and only 3% are at Harvard. So I want to put it back to you of how do we get a better sense of assessing where we are compared to our neighbors that I think most of our community members like to compare ourselves against. How do we get a better sense of where we are at all levels against a broader number of those neighbors?
So, I realize this is a very
Yeah.
small sample size that we
Yeah.
have, and ideally, I would have heard from all of the districts,
Yeah.
and we would have had a better, a grander comparison. So, and I think without that, I think, overall, the trends, and I hear this from directors in these districts, the numbers, the applications that are being received in record numbers at these institutions are occurring in those districts as well. So while I don't have the numbers from every district, I could say that each one of them is feeling the same way. One of the messages, things that we talk to parents, and parents talk about, well, it's 5%. It's 5% worldwide. So, and we happen to live in an area that's really rich with opportunities, and students have access to so many great programs, and Schreiber is, we've got some of the best. So in terms of a comparison of the Wisconsins, et cetera, sure, we have that information as well, and we look at that information. I could say, without speaking directly to that, I do know that the number of students that apply each year creeps up and up and up. So when you're talking about dozens and dozens of students applying to the same school from Schreiber, at some point, the colleges have to make decisions. But to your point about that, that's definitely something to look at.
And then, so I think that's something that, I would put out there, something that we should be thinking about and maybe building some kind of table that we can look at on an annual
Sure.
basis that, works to.
Just trying to get more districts.
More districts and a broader range of.
So
of
the
how we're
schools are
performing.
easy. We could have put on
Got
5
it.
slides.
You have that
We have
data.
all
I
of
have it,
that.
yes.
Okay,
Now, the districts will be the challenge,
Right.
because as you can imagine, there's a lot of trust in turning over all of your college applications data to somebody for a presentation.
100%.
Right.
But maybe it's something that, I don't know, if we had even offline conversations that you guys could have a sense of, hey, we outperformed these other districts this year, we didn't, and maybe it's not in a table, or maybe it's, hey, we think we're staying competitive with these other schools, or we look like we're falling off. So otherwise, I don't know how we track ourselves.
And those conversations happen all the time, but, with all due respect, people don't necessarily believe those conversations. Sometimes presenting the data are good. Now, if we had an incentive, and if we could provide maybe districts, maybe $1 million who shared their data,
There also
But
are
they might
competitors
appreciate-
for these seats.
Yes, they might appreciate the information being sent back to them, so, you know what I mean, and those, so there's, so, okay, so that's, and I'll, since I know we're kind of, my second question is, and I wanna follow up on, really, what I think Nan asked was really the question, which is, why should a college get a Schreiber student over another student? And I think that's kind of the fundamental question, and it's about everything that we're doing, and I think that, we get, as trustees, we get a lot of people reaching out to us,
Yes.
sharing thoughts, and
Yes.
whether or not those thoughts are, 100% accurate is never
Yes.
possible to know. But we certainly, I personally have had a fair amount of people who come out of the work and reach out to me to tell me like how poorly Schreiber is viewed by the higher tier colleges. I have no reason to think that that's true or not, but it's something that when enough people start to say it, it becomes a question that has to be asked.
Yes.
So I want to put it back to you and say, is that something that you think there's any truth to, that Schreiber does not have a high reputation with?
Not at all, not at all, based on the conversations that I have with the schools. And I've heard them, unfortunately, we know when narratives sometimes perpetuate and some people just have a natural inclination to spread negative narratives, but that's not true at all. Sometimes it could come down to, if you have a Port Washington senior who's taken all the same classes, has mirrored GPA and, did all of the things, research, et cetera, and say you have a student next door in Roslyn and all of that, it could come down to maybe they needed an oboe player. Maybe they needed someone on the crew team. It could be that, it
course.
really could. And, we don't always, and that's what also makes it challenging when we talk to,
And donation.
yes. And when we talk to our neighbors and our friends in other communities who mean well, but they don't have the entire context. And this process is so incredibly nuanced and nebulous and really out of so much control. And this is the first time, maybe not, well, in most students' lives and in most parents' lives, I would say, and a parent that went through it, that we don't have too much control for something for our kids. So it's sometimes it's a little scary for us. So, but no, I would say there is no truth to that, but I do hear it. And that's why, after I got here and hearing many of those questions, I thought, well, it's time to, reach out and build those relationships now with a new director in the spot and ask the questions. So coming out of the pandemic again, those questions need to be asked. And, sort of a combination between what you asked and what you asked, and yes.
Rachel?
So first, I want to start by thanking you, because I think, as several board members have already said, this concern on the part of parents that Schreiber graduates don't do as well as our neighboring, peer districts, a student that would be kind of the same doesn't do as well from here. This has been a concern of parents going back for years and years and years, the entire 5.5 years I'm on the board, and I'm looking around and there were parent leaders and parent activists who can probably remember it 10 years back and 15 years back. And this conversation alone is yet another indication of the sea change we've seen in Port Washington over the last several years. There are 5 other board members besides me sitting in this room. Everybody, all the other board members were not on the board when I got elected 5.5 years ago. We've had a lot of change in the board. All the administrators sitting in the room weren't here 5.5 years ago. We've had a lot of administrative change. 5.5 years ago, when this question was raised publicly, the answer for both the board and the administration was, no, that's ridiculous. Of course not, we do fine. You don't have information, you don't know what you're talking about. No conversation, no data, no information. This is a sea change, right? Addressing the parent concern, the legitimate parent concern of, is my child going to be doing as well as they should be, is important. And then once you're willing to address this question of, are Schreiber graduates doing as well? And I hear you, Ms. Director, saying, yes, they are. Once you're having the conversation, to me, that question almost becomes unimportant. And the question then becomes, are Schreiber graduates doing as well as Schreiber graduates could and should be doing, and what else could we be doing? And I think that as both a parent and a board member, I tend to think that while we are teaching our kids responsibility and independence and to take control of their lives, that there are things that the adults should be in charge of and should take off people who are still children and not fully developed, even up to 18. And I think that's the parents in the institution. I think this is about stress too. We're the ones who should be setting the balance of helping push them forward without stressing them out. And I think the same thing here with the college issue. And so my biggest question, like a whole list, my biggest question is not just from a counseling perspective, but from a Schreiber, Weber, down to the elementary school programming perspective. Right now, when we have our kids applying, our colleges looking at these kids and doing an apples to apples comparison to other districts, it makes it very hard for kids to get in. And to what extent can we make it more an apples to oranges comparison? What changes can we make to our school district so that there is something, as Dr. Tyne said, that makes a Schreiber graduate stand out differently? So they're not another kid with this GPA, with this extracurriculars, who's ridiculously high achieving, and none of us would have gotten into school as compared to them, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, more years ago. What can we be doing in addition to that? And I think this is a question for you, Mr. Director, but really also for Dr. Feeney and Dr. Hines, maybe not to be answered today, like more of a philosophical question. How do we make changes all the way down?
So I just want to point out that in the cycle of a college's admissions process, some representatives are sitting across from each other and they're doing a read. Some school, every place it's different. Some have multiple points of people are reading, some are reading one and passing it forward. Colleges view students in the context of their own school. So that's the first point, that we sometimes we feel like we're 9, including me, we're 10. So 10 people are saying the same thing, and we need the broader community to know that Schreiber students are viewed in the context of Schreiber. They're not viewed in the context of another high school, whether it's next door or in Michigan or wherever. And they want to see that our students are taking the most rigorous course load possible, and then it goes on from there. So that's the first thing. But yet, to answer the question, and that is more philosophical as we move on down the line, how can we ensure that Schreiber students are the best they can be? And that's the bigger question that goes down into the earlier levels, and what are we doing to prepare our students? I think as we talk about preparing our students with the skills, with the resilience, knowing how to understand and learn from disappointment starts at the real younger ages, how to handle rejection, how to handle if you get a test back, it's not the grade you thought you were going to get, and you're disappointed in yourself, and all of the emotions that students feel when they have those feelings, and how do you bounce back from that? What do you do now to advocate for yourself? So teaching students how to handle that will really help them as they move on from elementary to becoming middle schoolers, and then thinking about high school and becoming a high schooler and handling any potential disappointment they might experience. That can all help them in this process, because I think so many of us have that very, we have our eyes set on one particular prize, and we are crushed when we don't get that and we internalize that. So I think it comes down to relationships and coping skills.
And Rachel, just to answer, because it really is one of the most important questions. And when I go back to the portrait, academic excellence is incredibly important. There's no doubt about it. But universities, colleges are not just looking at that. They're looking for somebody who's well-rounded. And that goes back to the portrait. And so what are our expectations, and do the students know what our expectations are when they leave our system after 13 years? And that's why the portrait's so important. We're in the embryonic stages right now of having the staff and the students understand what those emblems are and what that means, not only as far as attributes that they should aspire toward, but what are some of the things we're doing in the classroom, inside the classroom, outside of the classroom, so they are proficient in all those areas. That to me then will actually focus on our identity as Port Washington, as a Schreiber graduate, And that, I think, is something that's incredibly enticing to any university that's out there. So I think we're on the right path, we're not there yet. And as I'll end with this, as Laurie said, and I know Sean said over and over, and Katie at the high school, it is about relationships. Because if a student doesn't feel like they're part of something outside of themselves within Schreiber, then none of this really matters. And so that is one of the major focal points, but I think we're on the right path. And I agree with you, Rachel. The fact that we're having this conversation right now, in depth, looking at the things we're doing well and the warts that we actually have to extinguish at some point is a great first step for us to be the best that we can be.
I know we're running late. I have one more board member that I wanted to ask.
I just want to make sure I saw counselors wanting to raise their hand and jumping out of their seat.
They did.
I would like to, I would defer my time to you. I have a very small question, but do you have something you need to
Yeah,
contribute?
that would be amazing. Thank you. I'm Lori Jacobson. Lori, first of all, you did an amazing job. It was
Thank
so
you.
comprehensive. It was amazing. So thank you
Thank
on
you.
behalf of all of us. I think one of the things, we've been here, the majority of us, for a really long time. We are very educated in the college process. We pride ourselves in really doing a thorough job in researching and keeping up with trends and really being on top of things. And one thing, I just wanted to say a couple of quick things, if that's okay. One of the things that I just want to emphasize is what Lori just said about colleges looking at students in the context of our school. That is 100% correct. We've met with thousands of admissions counselors over the years. They look at students in the context of their school. They are not comparing our students to Roslyn. They are not comparing our students to Manhasset. That is an absolute fact. Every school is different. The demographics of our school, different from Roslyn, Manhasset. So they have to look at them differently. The other important thing that I just wanted to say is, I think that it's very important to educate parents and students very, very early on. And that's one of the biggest issues, because college at the foundation has become a huge business. And that's what we have to remember. And it's not about, we've been hearing, we've all been here close to 20 years, a lot of us, and we've been hearing it from the day, oh, our kids do poorly, we have a horrible reputation. And it's not about that. It's about educating parents and students. College is a business. I just did a lot of research recently because we had 6 or 7 students apply early to Duke without any acceptances. And I was very curious about why that happened. So the landscape of our world and our country is changing, as we all know. So colleges, admissions counselors have to consider many new variables that were not considered years ago. For example, on the Common Application, there is a new box to check. How do you identify male, female, gender X? 27,000 students across the country identified as gender X. So those types of things need to be taken into consideration. Colleges have to have students represented from each state. They cannot go over that amount in order to maintain equity, an equitable, amount of students. Colleges now have to accept, take gender into account, because that is, new, as we know, like over the past several years. Colleges have to accept a certain amount of international students. Colleges have to accept a certain amount of first-generation students. These and so many other things are why the acceptance and the Common Application, which, as Lori said before, 1,000 schools are now on the Common Application. In the early 90s, UPenn had a 50% acceptance rate. Now it's like 3%. It's because of the Common App. It's because of test optional. Thousands and thousands of millions of students are applying to so many more schools because of test optional. The days of college applications as we know it are done. It's a business. It's a money-making business, and that's factual. We meet with thousands of admissions counselors. Half of these counselors are just out of college. That's another thing to know. They are not 50-year-old, men and women who are staying with the school. They're 24, 25-year-old people who, that's a stepping stone. So to maintain relationships with those counselors
is very hard. So the only person I can think of off the top of my head is like Indiana. The woman has been there, this woman Brandy has been there for years, she knows our school. So I just wanted to lay that out there, that it's very important to educate parents and students early about the process. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak while you're all here, because I've been dying to talk about this stuff for years, so thank you.
Can I just piggyback on that? Sorry.
Mrs. Ludwig, we have one more staff member. Were you interested in sharing anything?
Oh, no, I 100%, I think Ms. Jacobson covered it, I just, I've been here also for 20 years, and the term diverse in the incoming freshman class at college, what diverse meant 20 years ago is very different to what diverse means now, and there's just so much more to cover in diversity to meet those criteria that colleges want. So that's a huge trend that in the last 20 years has changed. So, go ahead.
I just have to ask, we were supposed to end at 10:30. Is it okay to open it up to the community? Do you need to be going?
I like 5 more minutes.
Okay. Oh, I don't know what to do. I saw 3 people, 1, 2, 3. Go ahead.
Hi, Debbie Strell, one of the high school counselors. I just wanted to piggyback on another thing with Lori Jacobson, which is while the diversity at one point actually meant female, male. So that's completely changed with looking at international students, underrepresented, first generation. With all these new things that colleges are looking at, their freshman class remains the same size. So everything they add makes the typical college applicant, puts them into a much smaller box. So I just wanted to kind of add that to the mix.
And this is where, and just to answer, thank you. This is when we hear those concerns that, we don't, whatever negative narrative is out there, we don't perform, these are the factors, and so the visual is not necessarily the truth. But as I think you've just heard, the counselors are well researched on this. Please.
Hi, I'm Amy Richards. I was an independent educational consultant for many years with private prep. And I just want to speak to what you guys are saying in terms of, we don't know the district for the numbers to be compared to, but I can speak to like across the tri-state area. It's everywhere. It's happening everywhere. Scarsdale, you name it. Okay, so the numbers are difficult everywhere. I think we all get a little myopic in sort of what's happening here. My question is about the College Pioneers program. I worked a lot with the scholarship students at private prep, and I'm kind of really curious about what the College Pioneers program is, kind of what your plans are for like first generation. If there are any, just curious.
So College Pioneers started at Weber Middle School. It was an initiative from a former social worker at the middle school. Conversations are happening with some of Schreiber administration about what that can look like right now. So nothing has been decided yet, but I know, we're looking at conversations. And it's an access initiative for first generation college students so that they can have earlier access and information that they might not otherwise have for them.
We can talk about on the side, partner up.
Yes.
I'm sure you know about.
Yes.
Yeah, that they're doing great work.
Yes.
George.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I pretty much agree with Mr. Rooney's postulation about colleges. It has become a business, where it makes parents in debt for the rest of their lives, indentured servants. It used not to be that way. I can tell you, many, many moons ago when I went to college, it wasn't this way. But having said that, my wife and I did an analysis of, speaking to Rachel, what gives, right? You look at programs. So we look at, we focus on MIT, Harvard, Yale, and a couple of others. okay, these are the students that are, let's take Harvard. These are the students that are at Harvard, but it could be Yale, whatever. Where are they coming from, right? We're going backwards. Where are they going backwards? They're coming from X high school, B school, high school. Then look at the high school. What is going on in that high school? What is it about that particular high school that is sending so many of their students to Harvard or Yale or whatever? And what programs are available within that district, within that high school, and what incentives, what stimulation, all those things are making so many students being accepted. Because I can tell you, I will mention name, there is a school that, my God, I think it's in Massachusetts. Most of the students go to Harvard. And there is a function of money, absolutely. You know, if you can afford to pay Harvard, you know, it's fine. But so for us, I think it's important to at least learn, not necessarily that we can replicate, right? What is going on in high school district B? What is it that they are giving the students? What opportunities? What is the culture that enhances academic achievement? And by academic achievement, I don't mean making the kids work until 2:00 in the morning, trying to meet the homework, you know, to be, that's ridiculous. So maybe that it is a long process. I mean, we took a long time, you know, with a table on trying to find out what is going on here. Now that is not scientific. I'll be the first one to admit, but it gave you a pretty like, wow, this school has these programs. This is what is going on, and these students are being channeled right into these schools. And I just finished by saying that doesn't mean that this should be like a program to get everyone into Yale. You know, I don't necessarily agree that Yale is for everyone, even though you could be very bright. You have to fit within your school to be successful. But a lot of parents want to have their kids in Yale, Harvard. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. For talking points or whatever. I mean, maybe that culture has to change, but I don't think it's going to change here because that's just the culture of this country. So anyway, maybe that's a way to look back, Rachel. Going back, deconstruct what are these schools that are offering? And I don't mean to replicate, because we cannot compare ourselves to some of these schools.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, we still do time. Fight it out, guys. Thank you.
I didn't have to run, so I have two very brief comments, but I want to sort of ground us in things that are tactical and maybe immediately actionable. First of all, Mrs. Director, thank you so much for that very thoughtful and comprehensive presentation. As you can see, there was a ton of interest in the community in the topic, so it was really very helpful. And you know, to Dr. Feeney's point, he raised a point about this really being a K-12 effort, and a few others have mentioned it throughout, that we really have this ecosystem of supports for our students. They don't just show up on the first day of junior year with this master plan to get into college. So when we talk about reducing caseload, that's something that came up quite a bit throughout this meeting. I would just like to make it explicit that a reduction in caseload for our counselors at every level comes not only through counseling resources, but also through additions to our social work department. I think our district is desperate for more social workers to reduce the caseload across the board and allow our school counselors, our college counselors to really focus on the social emotional work that needs to be done to prepare our students for that day at junior year when they get in and are confronted with their master plan. The second point I wanted to make, and something I didn't really see in the presentation around future initiatives, is the potential for community partnerships to leverage the resources and the skills that are present in our amazing community. I think parents, community members are just waiting to be called upon to support kids. You know, we see at the annual junior mock interview event, it's always so popular among the community. It's a very easy way for community members to help support our children and build the skills and the confidence they need to go into college interviews or job interviews. I'm very hopeful that that comes back in person this year. It's a wonderful event. But I think exploring more opportunities like that, we have many wonderful professional writers and editors in our community who are just ready to support poor students who may not have access to external third-party college counselors, who may not have those resources. So I think there are a lot of wonderful resources resident in our community that we just need to call on.
Thank you, I agree, and I think that's also part of the reason where the essay writing workshop was born out of, but I definitely hear your point. And in terms of the junior college workshop, the junior mock interviews, I have a meeting next week with the Charter HSA to talk about what their thoughts are for it. So it is happening. And we've also talked in the past, I think I had spoken to Mrs. Kane about, ways to sort of offshoot from there, or what else can we do with that? So yes, agreed.
In the interest of time, what I didn't bring up along those lines was access to, really interesting internships for our kids that could also differentiate them.
So some of that is part of our senior experience, right? So when we do have partnerships and looking to expand those with the community is always one of our goals.
Okay, last one, and then we'll let these poor people go.
That being last. So I thought it was very interesting, two of the things that came up earliest, and let me also say thank you to Mario, this was really informative. But two of the things that came up earliest in the conversation were Adam talked about how do kids identify the universe of colleges that are realistic for them given their trajectory. And you talked about stress and the stressfulness of this process. And I think those two things are linked. I think that's really murky. And I'm saying this as a parent of a senior. I also have a student who's a junior in college. It's really murky, I find, to identify that universe. It's like there's a lot of uncertainty about it. And I just wanted to highlight some things I think contribute to that. And I wonder if part of reducing the stress would be to help students with that process more, or maybe try to find ways to make it less uncertain, So for us, when my daughter first started looking at colleges, this 4.5 GPA that we have doesn't align with the information that colleges are given, So that sort of was confusing to her and to us as well. It's like we have to do a translation process to understand, well, what does your GPA mean with the numbers that are being provided by other sources? And so then, of course, we have Naviance, which gives the scattergram. But if you have a student who has a very robust set of extracurricular accomplishments, then, they don't know really what to make of a scattergram that's really reduced to some numbers, So that's also a source of confusion. And then to add on top of that, the recent move toward test optional, a kid who did well and thinks that's going to be a strength, and then it's sort of like, well, maybe it's not. If it's test optional, maybe this isn't a strength for me anymore. So I think the confusion or the feeling that this is like a little bit murky or opaque is part of the stress, because maybe part of the reason that there's this narrative that we're not doing well is maybe too many students are going into the process, maybe not choosing an entirely realistic list. That's just the thought that I have.
So I will speak to that for a moment, and I really appreciate that because I will tell you that our grading scale is a popular topic of conversation in our department for sure. We do offer in our college guidebook the breakdown and the translation on that, but maybe we need to think about other ways of highlighting that if students aren't accessing or realizing that it's there. Although I will say, at each junior conference, the councils are going over that information, talking about what a 4.5 at Schreiber have compared to, that would be 4.0 at college X, right? So all of those different things. And those conversations do sort of highlight the need to go beyond the plots and the scattergram and, but in fact, if students are feeling, it is a murky terrain and test optional, and, we do have, counselors have multiple conversations with students about what that looks like when the students get their scores, and we advise them on that, and we get our information from the colleges. I'll go back to, again, things that I think about, what Dr. Hines said, reducing caseloads, giving us access to being able to have smaller group opportunities with our juniors or more opportunities with our juniors. How can we tailor that in and not impact the instructional day? So I completely agree with you, and looking at ways to get that done so that it's maybe not as confusing, and let's get around some of that information. One of the things we saw this year that, as soon as, I think by the end of September, I remember saying, well, that's it, we're going to explore this differently this year, because I think it was Clemson that moved their application earlier, that you had Southern schools that all of a sudden had decided that they were going to open the timeline earlier, and then we're going to flood kids with reminder emails each time a student applied. Let's say they applied on August 5th. Well, we're not back yet, counselors aren't back yet, and, we have a process, we're processing for 400 seniors, we have to work through and get that done. So if we're getting transcripts out by the end of September, it's actually pretty good, because early action deadlines are not for a month later. But as the schools are sort of hawking these kids, get it in, get it in, get it in, all it does is create panic in the students and the parents. And then we hear, oh, Schreiber's not doing this. And so these are some of the reasons why it's so important for us. And, I join Facebook groups with college counselors and high school counselors. And one of the things we are begging for to these schools is, please stop telling the kids the moment they've submitted an application that you need to get your stuff in. We in New York, we start school later than anywhere else in the country. So if the Common App opens on August 1st, there are schools that are back in session, so which is fine. We have parents that insist that our students are at a disadvantage because we can't send transcripts in August. That's absolutely not true, because colleges cannot penalize us for starting in September. So,
But if it's rolling admissions,
yes,
they're gonna start to accept students.
they don't accept, so the same thing where all of New York State, no one is sending the transcripts in, or let's say the entire Northeast. No one's sending a transcript out in August before it's ready to go. We could not finalize something, we wouldn't be doing a service to the student.
No, I agree, but what if Texas schools send theirs out in August because they're in session?
Right.
And it's a rolling admission, do those students have an advantage over the Northeast?
So, no, because, well, if we're talking about Texas public schools, which now have to guarantee that 90% of their students are coming from the top 10% of the class, which limits the number of out-of-state students. So that was another point, I think, maybe mentioned in the slide somewhere, that, that the numbers for out-of-state public schools, they only accept a certain amount of out-of-state students. So to your point, they're looking to diversify geographically. They know they're not going to accept kids right away, everybody from Texas, and then not being able to accept students from the Northeast because they didn't get it in time. Rolling admissions, by and large, still tends to be a 4 to 6 week, at least a 4 to 6 week window. They know, those admissions offices know that they're leaving out an entire segment of the country if they are accepting only from those geographical areas that are open. Exactly. Yes.
I promise I'll be super fast. Maybe your answer will be, but you can think about it instead. You had several slides up that showed all of the various events and professional development our counselors are getting all the time. So it could be a question and answer, it could be a thinking question for you. How is that information and all the knowledge learned there shared with parents and students and when. And in case it's a thinking question because of the time, the context I'm coming from is that I think educated parents can be better partners. And parents absolutely should be partners with the schools in this and in everything. So how is that shared? So that parents can really have this knowledge to be able to be helping their kids instead of just saying, well, you're a smart kid, so your list is Harvard, Stanford, Yale, right? Because that's not the right outcome for us to have every kid with A's applying to the same 3 schools. That's not gonna be a good outcome, and those schools aren't necessarily the right fit. But I think every parent, if you educated them fully, what every parent really wants is for their kid to land in the best school that they can get into that is a good fit for them, that will make them happy. And I think that gets shortcut sometimes when a parent doesn't necessarily understand the whole picture and how the various schools are looked at and is less knowledgeable. So how do we educate parents? Is it happening? Do we need to do more?
It is happening and we need to do more. It is happening because each and every one of those conversations that the counselors are having with their students and parents, they discuss a list of those schools, and even let's say our student with a 4.5 or really probably over a 5.0 GPA, but and there will be Ivies and top tier institutions on those lists, and there are going to be schools also because they are aware of the trends. Let's think about other schools that you could potentially be happy at and that you've shown an interest in. So I'll go back to your initial question or thought. We have the National Conference for College Admissions Counseling is going to be in Baltimore this September. They know we've been talking about it already. I know I'm planning to go, and I would love for us to be able to have what the counselors learn and the information that they gain at these conferences. And my vision was we take a divide and conquer approach. There is so much information to be shared and so much that we can bring back, and that will be used to inform our parents in our senior meetings, in our junior meetings. I've looked at and reflected upon ways that I can have additional parent engagement, and I've got some thoughts in my head and things. There's a book that I'm interested in, and I'd like to do it with the counselors first and then bring some parents into it. Thinking of additional ways. I would love to talk to the HSA and to Parents Council about ways to sort of collaborate on new ways for parent engagement. I have another idea swirling in my head that I'm, just getting my feet wet with using additional technology. So I'll just put it here for a second. But yes, it has to be a greater conversation. Agreed.
Thank you. I'm sorry we went over again. I appreciate your time. We all appreciate your time. Thank you for the community interest. Next month's topic is the PEC review on February 3rd. And we look forward to seeing everyone at that time, and have a good day.
There's the Arrogate Consumer Grants.
I keep trying. Oh, we have to get rid of this. Thank you. That was terrific. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.